Around 156 million people in Brazil are called to participate this Sunday's polls to choose the next president of the country between the former president Lula da Silva and the current president Jair Bolsonaro. Russia announced the withdrawal of troops in the city of Krasny Liman, facing the advance of Ukrainian forces. The Economic Community of West African States, Ecowas, condemned a new military coup in Burkina Faso. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news. Around 156 million people in Brazil are called to participate this Sunday's polls to choose the next president of the country between the former president Lula da Silva and the current mandatory Jair Bolsonaro. In addition to the head of state, voters will have to elect the future vice president, 27 governors, 513 deputies, 27 senators, and regional deputies. According to the Brazilian Superior Electoral Court, the TSE, the polling stations started open at 8 a.m. local time and will close at 5 p.m. The Brazilian Constitution establishes that vote is mandatory for every literate citizen born in the country or naturalized between 18 and 70 years of age, while people with electoral residence abroad will only be able to vote in presidential elections. Months ahead of the elections, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the presidential candidate of the Workers' Party, and President Jair Bolsonaro have been leading the voting intentions, according to almost all the surveys. Lula's lead over Jair Bolsonaro ranged between 3.7 and 16 points. If none of the candidates manages to surpass 50% of the votes, a second round will take place on October 30th between the top two candidates. As Election Day arrived in Brazil, our correspondent Brian Muir brings us details on how this event will unfold.
It's Election Day here in Brazil, and Brazil's over 150 million registered voters are expected to come out across the country today to vote for candidates for president, vice president, federal and state Congress. I'm standing in São Paulo in front of Sion School. It's a Catholic school where on February 10th in 1980, the Brazilian Workers' Party signed its charter with 32 signatories, including legendary educator Paulo Freire and Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who is leading all polls for the presidency today. Some polls even saying he's expected to win it in the first round. To do that, he needs 50% of the votes plus one. He's going to vote today in his hometown of São Bernardo do Campo. It's an industrial suburb of São Paulo with a population of over 1 million people, where he grew up working in the Volkswagen factory and where he still lives to this day on the same block as the ABC Metalworkers Union. Second place candidate and incumbent Jair Bolsonaro is expected to vote this morning in Vila Militar in Rio de Janeiro. It's a neighborhood full of military officers near where he lives on the west side. Now here at Sion, former President Fernando Henrique Cardoso was expected to vote later this morning. There's some questions about his age, though. He may be too frail to come out. He might have submitted his vote by mail. Nobody knows yet, but the cameras here watching to see if it happens as well. It's going to be an exciting day. Once again, some people predicting a first-round victory for former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. If that happens, this will go down in history as one of the greatest political comebacks of the last 100 years.
Now we move on to other topics. The Nicaraguan government has broken diplomatic relations with the Netherlands over its repeated interventionist and neo-colonialist position. This is confirmed by the statement of the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of the Government of Reconciliation and National Unity of Nicaragua. The document adds that the European country continues to offend Nicaraguan families with threats and suspensions of works of common goods as hospitals for populations with special requirements for assistance. The document also confirms the colonialist tone of the European country and reminds them that the world does not forget the crimes against humanity they have committed.
Buenas tardes a todos y todas. En estos momentos ingresa.
And that said to the ambassador, and that we say to the government, here in this land, in this homeland, our flag is respected. The flag defended by our Sandino general. And the one who comes here to disrespect our people, our homeland, so he doesn't return to our country. We don't want relations with that interventionist government.
And the government of Venezuela reported on Saturday the release of 2 Venezuelans unjustly imprisoned in the United States. It also confirmed the humanitarian release of several American citizens. Through an official statement, the Bolivarian government expressed, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela wishes to inform our people and the international community that as a result of various talks held since March 5th with representatives of the United States government, the release of the 2 young Venezuelans unjustly imprisoned in that country has been achieved. It is also reported that the Venezuelan justice system has decided to release, for humanitarian reasons, a group of United States citizens subjected to legal proceedings in that country. In Venezuela, the second group of the crew of the TeleSUR company aircraft arrived, kidnapped by the Argentine justice, where the aircraft and 5 other crew remained detained without any justification. The second group, consisting of 2 members of the entire crew, is composed of the Venezuelan citizen José Contreras Garcia and the Iranian Mohammad Khosravyagah. The fact comes after Judge Federico Villena determined the dismissal of the case and all the proceedings in force on both crew members. With this event, there are 14 released in the framework of an arbitrary judicial process that has not been demonstrated the responsibility nor the veracity of the accusations against any of those involved. Now we address other topics. Various social and sectors of the Cuban civil society are working to bring supplies to Pinar del Rio, the province most affected by Hurricane Ian. This is what the socio-cultural project Quisiguava does together with private workers and several municipalities. Yesterday, the President Diaz-Canel mentioned that the country has received support from international organizations, small and medium-sized enterprises, and governments of the region, where Venezuela will deliver 300,000 bags of food supplies, and Mexico supported with 72,000 meters of cable, 7,000 insulators, and other essential resources.
This is exquisite motivation. The principal motivation is to be together, is to help, is to offer a mutual support only for love. Thinking another one is a principal motivation. In our patrimony, in our homeland, we have many conditions for to be help people, for to send a hand for the people in special disability, in special vulnerabilities.
We'll take a short break now, but first, remember you can now follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. More news coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Russia announced the withdrawal of troops in the city of Krasny Liman, facing the advance of Ukrainian forces. The city of Krasny Liman was liberated at the end of May 2022 by the Russian forces and their allies, but in the last days the Ukrainian forces advanced as an assault operation, bombarding the city and surrounding it from surrounding areas. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, in the last 24 hours, 200 Ukrainian soldiers were killed and 5 tanks and 9 infantry vehicles were neutralized. The ministry also reported that the forces in the city of Krasny Liman, north of the Donetsk region, were redeployed to strategic positions at risk of being surrounded by Ukrainian troops in the region. In the United States, White House Security Advisor Jake Sullivan declared that Ukraine's entry into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is an issue for another time, although they will continue to supply weapons for the conflict. During a press conference, Sullivan said that although the United States supports NATO's open door policy, it considers that the process for Ukraine to become a member of that alliance is not currently a priority issue. In parallel, he indicated that the best way to support Kiev at this time is through practical support on the ground. He assured that Washington will continue to provide military assistance to Ukraine with the signing of a provision by Congress that includes more than $12 million in additional funds for this purpose. The Secretary General of the Alliance, Jens Stoltenberg, recalled that this decision must be taken with the approval of the 30 member countries and those who aspire to join the military bloc. In this context, U.S. media revealed this Saturday that the U.S. Department of Defense is preparing to deploy a command center in Germany to monitor and manage the conflict in Ukraine in coordination with its EU and NATO allies. According to the New York Times, the mission is scheduled to include at least 300 people who will be sanctioned or stationed at the European Army headquarters in the German city Wiesbaden. Likewise, the newspaper stated that the final decision will be taken in the coming weeks. For its part, the Pentagon allocated a new military aid package to Ukraine valued at more than $100 million and including 18 precision artillery systems, more than 150 Humvees, and transport vehicles. In the Baltic Sea, the researchers of the global emissions monitoring company GHGSat-1 recorded the largest release of polluting methane gas after the rupture of the Nord Stream gas. The gas leakage rate at one of the 4 breakpoints reached 22,920 kilograms per hour, the highest level on record. The Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines suffered this week from unexplained breakages, which threatened to permanently shut them down. The Russian government claims that it was an act of sabotage and is being investigated by the Prosecutor General's office as a terrorist action. Russia's representative to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, declared this Friday that the breakdowns clearly benefit the United States. In the UK, citizens marched this Saturday in rejection of the energy tariffs. Meanwhile, a protest movement announces that hundreds of thousands will stop paying their bills. These demonstrations, coordinated with numerous social organizations and trade unions that will take place over the weekend in various cities of the country, are given in the framework of the increase of the average annual energy bill for households, which went from £1,971 to £2,500 as of October, which represents a total of $2,790. This at a time when the cold season comes to country. Given the situation, some 200,000 households have promised to stop paying the bill until the government does more to protect the most vulnerable families. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. The Economic Community of West African States, Ecowas, condemned on Saturday the military coup in Burkina Faso. Ecowas assures that they have broken progress achieved through diplomatic relations. The group of soldiers, headed by the captain of the army, Ibrahim Traoré, announced this September 30th the dismissal of the interim government. The African bloc has considered the operation as ultimately and condemns it in the strongest terms. The violent seizure of power occurred this week. Both ECOWAS and the African Union have suspended participation in the country pending the restoration of constitutional order. And a handful of Afghan women protested the killings of students in an education center in Shid neighborhood of Kabul. Carrying banners reading in English and diary reading "Stop Hazar Genocide," the protesters demanded security from the Taliban government. In the Kash Education Center, staff cleared wreckage caused by the attack, while victims' families searched through bloodied belongings. The attack on the Kash Educational Center, which happened on Friday while students were taking an exam for university entrance preparation, killed at least 19 people, mostly female students, and wounded 27 others, according to Taliban government officials. But eyewitnesses gave a different account on the death toll, saying it was more than 200. The suicide bombing was the latest in steady stream of violence since the Taliban seized power. No one immediately claimed responsibility for this attack.
First, the attacker was just over there, where a huge crowd of students were standing, and he opened fire. At least 40 people were killed there. Those who say only 19 were killed is wrong. Then, when people were trying to escape, the other attacker exploded his explosives here. So I think around, or maybe even more than 200 people were killed.
13 people were rescued on Saturday after a 4-story building collapsed in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. It's believed that 17 people were inside the building when it came down. The Iraqi Ministry of Interior issued a statement saying that so far civil defense teams had rescued 13 people from the wreckage, while work was ongoing to find those still missing. The building, which housed several laboratories, was located in Baghdad's Al-Wathiq Square. And the Vietnam-Cuba Business Promotion Forum concluded this Friday with the signing of 7 agreements for an amount of $500 million. The event, organized with more than 10 local companies in the context of the visit of the Cuban Prime Minister Manuel Marrero to the Asian nation, grants a new surface right in Cuba to implement the expansion of the first 20 megawatts in photovoltaic solar parks of the 150 megawatts committed by 2023. In addition, an agricultural livestock project is to be developed in this special area, as well as supply and cooperation initiatives in the biopharmaceutical field. The Chinese government is preparing a plan to strengthen the national currency. The strategy includes reducing US dollar holdings in public banking. The authorities ordered state financial institutions to sell their holdings in dollars and stock up on yuan, which according to specialists could help prevent a further fall in the Chinese currency. Economists expect an increase in the volume of foreign exchange that favors the parity of the yuan against the dollar. Indeed, after the news broke out, the extraterritorial yuan, in which 70% of operations are carried out worldwide, experienced a recovery of 200%. to reach a rate of 7,185 yuan per dollar. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.
General election